Many eyes are on Panama, where President Obama and Cuban President Raul Castro are both attending the Summit of the Americas this weekend. It will be the first meeting between the two world leaders since the White House announced plans to normalize diplomatic relations with Cuba. Polo Sandoval explores the diplomatic talks and whether unrestricted travel to Cuba is in the near future for Americans and what that would mean for other Caribbean destinations.
The sunny Cuban coastline is still out of reach for most American tourists. Sure, President Obama's December announcement promised to thaw the icy relations between the U.S. and Cuba.
Isolation has not worked.
But the new rules only allow some Americans to visit the island without permission from the U.S. government. Travelers need to fit into one of 12 categories. Among them are journalists and people visiting the island for educational, cultural, or religious reasons. As for the typical American tourist, there are still some restrictions. It would take an act of Congress to clear the way because of the embargo put in place in 1960.
In Cuba.
And there's no telling when or if Congress might act. But there could be some prospect for change with U.S. and Cuban leaders coming together for the first time in almost 60 years. President Obama and Cuban President Raul Castro may meet at the Summit of the Americas.
Perhaps no one's watching the ongoing diplomatic talks between these two as close as Cuba's neighbors, places like the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and then there's the U.S. Virgin Islands. Everybody here makes a lot of money off of tourism.
More than 60 cents of every dollar in our economy is generated by tourism.
Beverly Nicholson Doty is Tourism Commissioner of the U.S. Virgin Islands. She feels a little bit of competition in the Caribbean wouldn't be a bad thing.
Any new destination that comes into our competitive marketplace certainly has the opportunity to redirect some of our business. But when you start looking at Cuba, we recognize that we know it's on the horizon.
If tourism ties are ever fully restored, it would likely put Cuba back on the map as a popular getaway. Until then, most Americans can only dream of cruising down Cuban streets and reliving the nostalgic Havana nights of the 1950s. I'm Polo Sandoval reporting.
Leaders in the State Department are expected to recommend Cuba be removed from the government's list of state sponsors of terrorism. That designation has been a stumbling block in the establishment of embassies in both Havana and Washington.